Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be dealing with the session functional columns. So I'll be dealing this session under two headings, part 1 functional columns and part 2 functional columns. So in part 2 I'll be showing you how the cranial nerve nuclei are arranged according to the particular functional columns. So in the beginning, when we talk about the development of the nervous system, we know that the nervous system develops from a single neural tube, which is derived from the neural plate. Okay, so you can consider this as a single neural tube with two lateral walls, and these two lateral walls on either side are again divided into a part which is lying dorsally and a part which is lying ventrally. You call the one which is lying dorsally as the dorsal alar lamina and the one which is lying ventral as the ventral basal lamina. So what do you call the sulcus which is lying between these two lamina? So the sulcus is called sulcus limitans. So you have the neural tube which is having two lateral walls, and these two lateral walls are further divided into a dorsal and ventral part by the sulcus known as sulcus limitans, and the dorsal one is called dorsal alar lamina and the ventral one is called ventral basal lamina. Now the dorsal alar lamina will be giving rise to the sensory neurons and the ventral basal lamina will be giving rise to the motor neurons. So this is how the general makeup of the neural tube is like. Now what happens with development? With development, we know that the single neural tube, the cranial part will be developing into the vesicles, the brain vesicles, which will be giving rise to the forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. And the caudal portion, the elongated caudal portion of the neural tube will be forming the spinal cord. That is the general architecture of the neural tube. Now what happens is, we know the hindbrain part, it has to accommodate the fourth ventricle. So these two lateral walls will open like a book, and this will be aligned in a horizontal, somewhat oblique or horizontal pattern. So what happens, you have the sulcus limitans here and you have the dorsal and ventral lamina which will be now arranged not dorsally and ventrally but medially and laterally. That is, it has to accommodate the fourth ventricle, mainly the pons and medulla will be accommodating the fourth ventricle, and as a result of that the two lateral walls will be opening up and the dorsal and ventral will now be aligned as the lateral and medial component. With respect to this, we will be describing the positioning of the cranial nerve nuclei in the next section. So first let's see how the nuclear groups are arranged in the medial and lateral portion. So you have the sulcus limitans here, and in the beginning what happens is you have four main columns. Okay, four main columns. You call these as general somatic efferent, general visceral efferent, general visceral efferent and general somatic efferent. These are the four columns which are there in the beginning. And you can see that somatic means it comes from the body wall and visceral means it comes from the inner aspect like the smooth muscles, the glands and the viscera. Okay, so that is how these are arranged, and you know the word meaning of efferent and efferent, isn't it? Efferent means going to, so it will be supplying and it will be motor, and efferent means it will be carrying impulses towards the brain, so it will be sensory. So that is what we already mentioned. The dorsal group will be sensory, dealing with the sensory information, and the ventral group will be dealing with the motor information. So this ventral is now medial and this dorsal is now lateral. So the ones which are coming in the medial aspect will be having efferent fibers, and the ones which are arranged in the lateral aspect will be called efferent. Okay, so that is how you get efferent and efferent. So in the beginning you have four general columns. They are not specialized, they are just general sensations and general motor informations passing from the brain. So you have general somatic efferent, general visceral efferent. So these two belong to the ventral basal lamina. Then you have general visceral efferent and general somatic efferent, which are belonging to the alar lamina. See, so these are the 4 main columns, and you can also understand from this figure that this is the sulcus limitans, and on either side of the sulcus limitans you have these visceral columns arranged. So general visceral efferent and general visceral efferent, these 2 visceral components are arranged around the sulcus limitans. Now again, as the development progress, you have the branchial arches, you have the 6 branchial arches developing where the 5th just disappears. So when these arches are formed and when these arches are giving rise to its derivatives, you need nerves to supply all these, isn't it? So there comes the importance of another column that is called special columns, exclusively for supplying the derivatives of the branchial arches. So these special columns are inserted in between these general columns. So in the ventral basal part, when you insert a special column, you call it as special visceral efferent, and when you insert the column in the dorsal alar laminar portion, you call it as special visceral efferent. That is how you get the special visceral efferent that will be between the general somatic efferent and general visceral efferent, and the special visceral efferent which will be seated between general visceral efferent and general somatic efferent. So now we understood how the 6 columns of the functional columns are arranged. Now actually we have 7 functional columns. So the last one is called special somatic efferent. So what do you mean by the special somatic efferent? Again, it is something special, right? So special somatic efferent are actually the nuclear aggregation which carries the hearing and balancing information. So that is something related with hearing and balancing. We will know or we will see the details of all these columns with respect to the cranial nerve nuclei in part 2 section. So for the time being, I will just sum up. We have the neural tube in the beginning, which has got 2 lateral walls which are divided into 2 parts by the sulcus limitans. It is divided dorsal alar lamina, which is sensory, and the ventral basal lamina, which is motor. And in course of development, in order to accommodate, here you have the 4th ventricle. Okay, so in order to accommodate the 4th ventricle, especially the pons and medullary portion will just open up, and this dorsal and ventral will now be aligned as medial and lateral, and the sulcus limitans will be aligned like this. And you have first 4 columns, the general columns developing. The part which is lying in the ventral portion, you call it as efferent columns. So general somatic coming from the general body wall, and visceral coming from the inner aspect of the, like the smooth muscles and the glands. And in the dorsal portion, which is dealing with the sensory component, you have 2 columns, that is general visceral efferent and general somatic efferent. These are the first 4 columns, and you have the visceral components arranged around the sulcus terminalis. Sorry, sulcus limitans. So sorry, sulcus limitans, don't get confused, it is sulcus limitans. Now with the development of the pharyngeal arches, you have 2 more columns which are aligned in the ventral and dorsal lamina, that is called special visceral efferent and special visceral efferent, which are actually inserted between these 2 sets of general columns. And the last one is the special somatic efferent, which are concerned with the hearing and balancing. So please do watch part 2 so that you will have an idea about how the cranial nerve nuclei are derived from these special columns. And it's very important for most of the exams, and this can be asked as a short note as well as an essay. So if you just know how the components are coming from these columns, then there is no need of by hearting. If you know the cranial nerves and the supply, you can very easily arrange the cranial nerve nuclei into these columns. Okay, thank you for watching, and please let me know whether it is useful for you. Thank you.